commented already, but on this resolution at the convention about sort of journalistic sources, was it a mistake then for the party in the convention to let it go this far? I understand you're disavowing it now, but why let it get to the point where it is party policy?
I mean, it came to my attention. You know, it's just something that would never happen. We would never allow that to become law.
But was it a mistake to actually let it become policy?
I'll have to think about that.
Do you think that people understood the ramifications of what they were voting for?
I don't know. I mean, you know, it didn't specifically deal with that issue, but it was, you know, associated with another issue, but it would be a ramification if it was ever law. And, you know, being in the position I'm in, I just wanted to make sure very clear, particularly for you guys, that that would never happen.
What does it tell us about the policy process of the Liberal Party? If something that important can be adopted without a discussion, without a debate, and then be disavowed so quickly by the
Yeah, I think we'll have to reflect on that.
But just on the ramifications.
There was about 200 people in the room on Saturday in the plenary to vote for these things. I mean, it seemed a bit weird that there was not a lot of people. Like, is there a thinking to do of how to mobilize more members?
Look,
like
overall, you know, 7.5 years in government, 4,400 people or 4,500 people showed up, 44% of them first-timers.
But at the plenary, I mean, there was not a lot of people there.
I'm pretty happy with this convention. I got to be honest. Like, it was pretty unheard of.
Do you think
on the
ramifications,
ramifications,
policy
Mr.
resolutions, debating them, and sort of, they didn't seem to be a lot of emphasis on showing up to vote for these resolutions?
Yeah. I think it was a successful convention. I really do. So, I mean, we're really parsing here to look for the negative. But I want to clarify something that's very specific that you asked me, and I want to be very, very certain in my response.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something. I was like, okay, be clear. On the ramifications, are there not the ramifications that this is in the ethos, and it could lead to people accusing your government? Perhaps it would be disinformation, but people accusing your government of censorship. I mean, we are seeing people take this resolution and say the Liberals want to do this. So was it not a
No. It came to my attention from you know, two of your colleagues almost immediately, and I turned it around very immediately to say there is nothing to see here. I'd never do that. Not on my watch.
Do you think that's enough to kind of kill the?
Yeah. Well, that's my intention.
One of your MPs, after the PM made his comments and said we won't do this, she posted this saying it was one of the top 3 priorities moving forward for the Liberals.
The overall policy. Yeah, okay, but I mean this specific part that talked about you know, tracing sources, I just wanted to caution. That's all.
So your party is, what you're saying is, despite the Prime Minister's comments, you're not vowing to never touch this resolution, just not part of the resolution.
Well, you know, the policy resolutions are, you know, not government policy, nor are they law, but they are the voice of what our party members have to say. That particular part about an anonymity for sources, caution.
Where's the what you'll hear from a number of racialized groups is that they've applied in the past and they feel that their applications don't get looked at. I try to dispel that, and I try to dispel that through the nominations that I've made. And I think if you look at those numbers, they're really very good in terms of women, in terms of racialized communities. Working hard to build the application pool so that we then have really good candidates to choose from. There's also another point that I think needs to be underlined, which is there have been a lot more judges that have elected to go supernumerary in the last number of years, and I don't know.
Why do you think that is? Is that a fatigue, mental health issues? What is it?
I don't know. I honestly don't know, and it's something that we need to do more work on. But there are many more requests for supernumerary judges, and so they still perform a role. That cuts both ways. They're still, so it's not quite a vacancy in the sense that it's a vacancy, but it's not a vacancy because they're still working part-time. And in some cases, they hear a lot of cases and important cases. It is something I work on every day. I have appointed at a pace that exceeds every other government in Canadian history.
Is it possible that in the desire to increase the quotient of racialized Canadians or women or even bilingual judges, is it possible that the overall pool is even, like, you're not actually tapping into a broader pool. You know what I mean? Like, is that slowing things down, actually?
I don't think it is. I do think we are careful in the process in the sense that we are trying to appoint quality as well as a certain quantity of judges. And I think if you ask, the Chief Justice has said this expressly, that they are very happy with the quality of the appointments that we have made across Canada and the diversity of the appointments. And you'll hear that. You'll hear that
sure,
echoed.
But they're very alarmed. I mean, he was speaking for all the Chief Justices
Oh, I know
across
that.
Canada.
I know that. They had met the week before. And
Right.
so, and I attended that too, and I heard it firsthand.
Oh, did you?
Yes, I did hear it from them firsthand.
So they read you the Riot Act?
Well, they expressed their very strong opinion to me, and as they should. And believe me, it's a priority for me. I'm working hard at it.
Is your government fighting Afghans hunted by the Taliban in court to delay the decision for them to come here because you're afraid of creating a legal precedent, given the number of folks?
I'm not going to comment on that. I've got other colleagues who are taking that file firsthand.
Monsieur le ministre, sur la proposition du Parti libéral votée en fin de semaine concernant les sources journalistiques, on se comprend qu'il y a des enjeux constitutionnels dans la proposition telle qu'elle est phrasée. Vos collègues ont dit que le Parti libéral ne mettra pas ça en œuvre. Qu'est-ce qu'il faut comprendre là, dans le système dans lequel on vit? Une résolution du Parti libéral ne devient pas une loi. Quelqu'un qui ne comprend pas ça, vous êtes le ministre de la Justice.
C'est plutôt une question de la politique publique et la formation de la politique publique dans le processus d'un congrès. Évidemment, il y avait certains militants qui ont mis de l'avant la proposition. Le Premier ministre vient de se prononcer là-dessus et donc on ne va pas aller de l'avant. Ce que je peux vous dire, c'est qu'on respecte les journalistes. On l'a démontré dès le début de notre mandat en 2015. On va protéger le travail des journalistes. On reconnaît que c'est un travail primordial pour la démocratie. Et c'est exactement ce que le Premier ministre vient de souligner l'autre jour. Pour la formation politique, il y a tout le temps des idées qui ne vont pas de l'avant.
Est-ce que ça a une valeur, une politique du Parti libéral du Canada?
Est-ce que
ça a une certaine valeur ou est-ce que c'est rien, finalement?
Non, mais ça fait partie du processus. Il y a plusieurs inputs, si je peux le mettre comme ça. Il y a les congrès, il y a les députés, il y a les associations à travers le Canada qui mettent de l'avant certaines propositions. À la fin, pour voir quelque chose dans la plateforme électorale, ça c'est une autre décision qui va être prise. Donc, il y a tout le temps plusieurs inputs. Certains qui sont rejetés et d'autres qui vont de l'avant. Mais c'est complexe.
Can we just get you in English on this Liberal convention motion? I mean, one of your colleagues says it's still a top priority for the party.
Well, it's been passed by the convention. As I just said in French, it's an input amongst many inputs. There will be other MPs who will put forward policies. There will be other associations that will put forward policies. And there have been long-standing parts of Liberal Party policy that never find their way into platform. It is. I mean, I remember as a young Liberal way back when I was young, legalizing cannabis. This was in the 80s. Was part of the Liberal Party's platform. It didn't make it to be part of the convention thing that conventions voted for as part of Liberal Party policy. It didn't make it into the platform until 2015. So. There's always a complex mix of policy proposals that have been passed at conventions that remain part within the sort of liberal discussion, if you will, on platform ideas, and then the platform will be decided closer to an election. No, I'm not going to comment on the policy. I think the process is a good one. It allows for a lot of input from a lot of different quarters, and I think that's critical to our movement.
What parts of this policy should remain in discussion?
I've already said it is something that's there. A number of people have supported. The Prime Minister has said we're not going forward with it.
Thank you.
Somebody asked for an update on Alberta wildfires and Indigenous communities. Do you still want that update?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I didn't ask for it, but
okay.
I think it would be helpful.
Well, I've got some details here. First of all, we've been in regular contact with Chief Sewepagam and Chief Sunshine, which are the two primary leaders in the region that's been most severely affected. There's been at least 150 homes lost infrastructure, community infrastructure also lost, and over 4,000 evacuees. Some have begun the return. This weekend is the weather prediction is kind of alarming, about 30 degrees, and so obviously very significant concerns about ongoing disruption. Many of the evacuees speak only Cree, so we've got specialized supports and staff in place that are able to provide services in Cree. Many people had to flee very quickly, so we're also working on all of the kinds of missing items that people might need. For example, walkers or medication or other kinds of things that are immediate and urgent necessity. The communities obviously are very concerned about how members will return and are starting to think about the potential for temporary housing while more permanent structures are rebuilt. And we'll be working with the community step by step to determine the best plan that they propose in terms of return. It's a devastating time. Both chiefs have talked about the emotional toil on the individuals that are evacuated, but also on their own teams. Obviously, trying to get people to safety is the priority, and keeping people safe while they're evacuated. Oftentimes, people who don't speak any English, who really do want to return home very quickly, but of course, all of that assessment has to happen before people are able to return to their communities.
And how do you respond to the concerns that oftentimes First Nations communities and Métis communities are the last to know when it comes to these emergency evacuations and preparations, or the last to get help?
Well, we work really closely with the provinces and territories on emergency management. What has been, I think, beneficial is that the federal government, under our leadership over the last couple of years, has reformed the emergency management program to be less prescriptive and gives First Nations people authority and autonomy to react in ways that are appropriate and in ways that are much more rapid. So, for example, before, communities would worry about whether or not a particular expenditure would be covered or not. So imagine, for example, trying to protect your community and renting equipment and wondering whether or not you should assume that expensive cost as a community or not, and whether it will be covered by the department. We've changed things now where there is an autonomy and an envelope for communities to work within, and obviously we do integrity checks, but it's not line by line, and we give communities their rightful authority over how best to deal with an emergency situation. That's given a lot of capacity to communities. What I think we need is provinces and territories to be working with us in an equal partnership on things like alerts and making sure that we do prioritize the most vulnerable populations. We know that climate emergencies actually predominantly affect Indigenous people in a oftentimes first and in a very severe way. And so that's the work that we continue to do with provinces and territories on integrated, cohesive approach to emergency management.
Sorry, I missed the beginning. How many structures?
About 150 homes, plus a number of community structures. For example, elders' facilities, council offices, those kinds of things, and about 4,000 evacuees at this point.
How long do you predict that'll take to rebuild?
I can't answer that. There are some really logistical considerations for Little Red River because the fact is some of those areas are not road access. So as you know, that ends up creating a huge challenge for people to get building equipment in. And so we'll be working with the communities on what their short and long-term plans are. And I've reassured both chiefs that we'll be there for the long haul. But I think that's the reality of building infrastructure in remote communities, is it's not as straightforward as people would think. You also need crews and a place for those crews to stay. So those logistics, as I said, we'll be there to support the community with as they work through it.
Something about a different topic, just going back to the Liberal convention. We saw a tweet from one of your colleagues, Julie Jerusalem, saying that those motions that were passed were still the top priorities for the party, including that motion on disinformation. As far as you're concerned, as a minister who's concerned about our democratic institutions, you know, is any part of that disinformation motion still on the table as far as you're concerned?
I think you've seen the Prime Minister's response and others' response. Look, I believe fundamentally in the freedom of the press, and I would say that oftentimes I think there's well-meaning resolutions that come from a party that may not be fully thought through in terms of a policy perspective. Oftentimes EDAs are, volunteers. They're individuals from grassroots communities, and they work through a particular policy resolution that they may not have the insight to be able to really fine-tune. My sense is that's part of what happened with that motion. I wasn't part of, obviously, that motion, but I will tell you that from my perspective, not just as a politician, but as a Canadian, the freedom of press is critical to the integrity of democracy, and so this government will always protect that.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bonjour Madame Lebouthillier. Qu'est-ce que vous dites à Québec s'inquiète des cibles en matière d'immigration? Trop d'immigrants, pour dire que ça va noyer le français. Vous répondez quoi à ça?
Bien, écoutez, moi, ce que je peux vous dire, là, c'est qu'au niveau de l'immigration puis des travailleurs étrangers temporaires, si on n'en avait pas eu dans l'est du Québec, en Gaspésie, ça faisait longtemps qu'on n'aurait plus de transformation des produits marins. On a besoin d'avoir des immigrants.
Et qu'en est-il de la culture, de la langue française? J'entendais M. Legault, les gens au Québec s'inquiéter.
Bien, écoutez, comme je vous dis, ça fait des années, nous, là, qu'on on a des travailleurs étrangers temporaires, puis ils ont même appris le français, puis ils sont très bien acceptés dans la communauté. Quand les gens arrivent, les gens, on est content de les avoir parce que ça nous permet justement de faire en sorte que nos entreprises de transformation, bien, les gens puissent manger du homard, du crabe, des crevettes.
Donc, les gens s'inquiètent pour rien au niveau culturel, au niveau linguistique?
Bien, moi, je peux vous dire qu'en Gaspésie, là, on est content de les voir, on est content de les avoir, puis ça fait des années. Puis, il y a de l'hébergement qui se fait, les entrepreneurs, il y a vraiment là, un beau travail de concertation puis de collaboration. L'intégration culturelle, je peux vous dire que ça se fait très bien. Merci.
Je voulais vous demander, au sujet de l'immigration, le gouvernement du Québec réclame plus de pouvoir pour contrôler l'immigration, entre autres pour les travailleurs temporaires étrangers. Est-ce qu'Ottawa est ouvert à l'idée de céder certains de ces pouvoirs-là au Québec?
Maintenant, il y a l'habilité pour la province de participer dans le processus de choisir des personnes qui arrivent, temporaires et permanentes aussi. Alors, c'est important de faciliter la perspective du gouvernement dans le processus et pour créer un environnement pour coopération. Mais selon moi, le processus marche maintenant pour trouver des employeurs, des travailleurs essentiels pour l'économie. Mais maintenant, il n'y a pas un plan pour changer le processus pour choisir les travailleurs étrangers maintenant. Mais s'il y a une proposition pour changer les règles, toujours, j'ai regardé les propositions, mais maintenant, selon moi, le processus marche. Mais c'est un différent enjeu comme la situation dans la Chambre de commune pour les jours récemment, sur l'enjeu de la résidence permanente. Mais j'ai continué à travailler avec mes homologues de la province et les territoires. C'est une part clé de mon job.
Donc, vous êtes ouvert à des discussions avec Québec, c'est ce que vous êtes en train de nous dire. Vous êtes ouvert...
Juste plus long, s'il vous plaît.
Vous êtes ouvert à des discussions.
Tu ouvert? Qu'est-ce que c'est?
You're open to
oh, OK. OK, absolument. Sur chaque enjeu, après les conversations avec mon homologue sur l'entente avec les États-Unis, avec les conversations prévues, pour les stratégies d'immigration, j'ai une bonne relation avec un ministre Frechette et si elle veut d'avoir une autre conversation, juste faites m'appeler, ce n'est pas un problème. Okay.
Just on Afghanistan, your government has recognized Shajan and Associates, the 25 Afghans who worked at this law firm, as particularly endangered by the Taliban in a public policy. But at the same time, in a lawsuit, you're arguing that their lives are not further endangered by waiting nearly 2 years for the cases to be processed. How do those two things relate?
So there's a number of elements of this, and I want to be careful about not speaking about the subjects of legal proceedings in more detail than is already public. But my view is that we want to process people who are destined to come to Canada, but the challenge that we're facing for people who still find themselves in Afghanistan is not a processing challenge. It's generally a safe passage challenge. For the people who are still inside Afghanistan, the challenges range from, without a military military or diplomatic presence on the ground, obviously, since the Taliban has seized control of Kabul and is managing things. It's difficult to, in some instances, understand where people are. When we do know where they are, it's very difficult to find third parties who have the ability to move them. It's difficult to get them through Taliban checkpoints, and now we're working on a number of different solutions to transfer them out of the country for onward travel to Canada. So until we have the safe passage sorted out, the processing challenges are not what's preventing a person from arriving.
This will have to be the last question.
The issue is there is no decision for these folks. It's not the processing challenges. That's one thing. You haven't given a yes or no to them. That's what's going on here.
So just with respect to the folks from Shadjan and Associates in particular, yeah. So we've been working with people who've been representing them, trying to find a solution for those people who were providing key services to the government of Canada. If you'd like, just because I'm late for a cabinet meeting that began 2 minutes ago, I'd be happy to follow up. Do we even have capacity later today, Bahoots?
Unlikely, but
Okay, because I'd like to follow up just to provide more clarity. When people's lives hang in the balance and they're worried about their safety, we want to share what information we can, and we want to do whatever we can to get them here as quickly as possible. So we'd be happy to follow up to get more information as soon as we can. And if I'm available, I'll chat, but if not, we'll try to get you something today.
Thank you,
okay, thanks, Rafi.
Thank you.
And I appreciate your understanding.
Thank you.
Okay, merci tout le monde.